Office Space becomes this cult classic and maybe the most quoted movie of a decade. And I know that took everybody by surprise based on what I've read about it. But when you do that and you see it work and people quote it back to you, is it still surreal all these years later, the success of that particular film?
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. In some ways, yes, because when I went to see it in Los Angeles at the cast and crew screening, I was only on the film for 2.5 or 3 days down in Austin, and it was one of those times where I had overlapping gigs. I had a gig up in Toronto with a Matthew Perry comedy. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a really good gig. It was a big Warner Brothers comedy that Matthew was doing during his hiatus from Friends, and so they wanted me down in Austin for like 3 weeks, and it was a conflict of dates. I had to be in Toronto, and so Mike Judge, who's the greatest, they compressed all that stuff, which is just that interior in the office where everybody comes to be interviewed, and then we see the two guys out on the floor a couple times, and that's it. And so that was compressed into 3 days. So I flew to Austin on a Monday, had a wardrobe fitting on Tuesday. I shot Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I was in Toronto for a wardrobe fitting on Saturday. So I wasn't there very much. So I only tell you that as a backstory so that when I saw the film and how genius Jennifer was in it and how great Mike was in it and Ron and all these actors and Gary, I wasn't on the set with hardly any of them. And so it rocked me how funny it was. And I just checked that one off as I'd been in a bunch of drama hits, but I hadn't been in a comedy hit yet. And I'm thinking, here we go. This will repackage the whole thing. And then it came out, and it was a dog with fleas. And I know why. I know one of the reasons is that some genius at 20th Century down at Fox, they made the poster, which is how people used to go to the movies. They used to, open up the Chicago Trib or, whatever, the New York Times, and look at a big full-page ad. And the full-page ad was of Milton, the guy with the stapler, dressed in yellow Post-its. And if you dress someone in yellow Post-its, they look like frickin' Big Bird. And then if it's a Big Bird R-rated movie, no one's going. And so the film tanked because some genius decided that was the marketing. And so
there are better ways to do that. It's what. Well, because John, it's one of the most relatable pitches ever. People hate their office jobs. Go laugh about how much office jobs suck. That should have been the easiest sell ever.
Right. Instead, you make it a Big Bird R-rated movie. Okay, genius.
God, these executives, they don't know what they're doing.
So then because it is so funny and Mike is so skilled, it somehow that's back when VCRs and DVDs and then Blu-rays, that's when all that stuff was realizing fruition. And so it had other outlets for people to find it, and they did. And I mean, the film is so subversive and so funny, and it's so not a studio movie. And so that was I love that film. I love it because I'm hardly in it, and I watch that ensemble, and they are watertight. I love when ensembles crush.
It's a brilliant movie, and it holds up, and I assume you'll appreciate this. I know you're a sports fan. The Bears are very dysfunctional right now, and their
Don't tell me about the Bears dysfunction. I'm a Giants fan, so I don't want to hear about your Bears making the playoffs. And
hey, listen,
the mediocrity that I'm living in.
Well, misery loves company. All right, it's been 35 years since a Super Bowl for the Bears, and they got this president. His name's Ted Phillips, and no one knows what he does, but he kind of hires and fires and has power. But he's not a football guy. And I'm telling you, when they brought back their GM and their coach, John, this was last week.
Oh, right.
We got, dozens of tweets, texts, or whatever, and it was basically Ted Phillips, and then what would you say you do here? It was constant. And so I'm curious, for the audience here in Chicago, is there any chance you'd give us, I know you're on Cameo and everything like that, but any chance you'd give us a Ted Phillips? What would you say you do here?
Ted, listen, Ted, what would you say you do here?
Yeah! It's so freaking perfect to what's going on with the Bears.